Last night, a friend pulled me out of the house to catch the opening act at a local bar's weekly music night. After a few drinks, I reached for my phone and realized it was gone. I checked my pockets, the table, the bar counter, and even the restrooms. No luck. I borrowed my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered. A low, raspy giggle echoed through the line. Then the call ended. I tried again. No answer. After several more attempts, I gave up, assuming the phone was lost for good. When I got home, there it was, on my nightstand, exactly where I'd left it before leaving the house. I never took it with me that night. When I was a kid, I was always the last to be picked up by the school bus. One morning, I stood alone at the stop when a bus pulled up empty. The driver smiled and said, "Hop on. We'll get the others." Something felt off. "Where are the other kids?" I asked. "We'll pick them up," he said, growing more insistent. "Just get on." I refused. He shrugged and drove away. A few minutes later, the real bus arrived. I told my parents that night. They were horrified. They hadn't known and immediately started making calls to the school district. Looking back, I realized how close I came to making a terrible mistake. A few years ago, I rented an apartment from a friend who had recently bought and renovated the building. Unable to sell it, he offered it to me as a short-term rental. Soon after moving in, I noticed something unsettling about the woman next door. She looked much older than her 45 years. Every night, she sat awake, blasting Christian radio and speaking loudly, often to no one visible. The noise kept me awake. One evening, I knocked on her door and politely asked her to keep it down. She opened it, just enough for me to glimpse inside. The walls were covered in hand-painted crosses, in various colors, with words like Jesus and angels scrawled across them. The windows were painted black. The air was thick with mildew, rot, and the stench of dog feces, though there was no dog. The 50-year-old carpet was stained and crawling with cockroaches. She stared at me, said nothing, and slammed the door. Then the volume went up. The next night, my girlfriend was staying over. I woke in the middle of the night to a shadow standing beside the bed. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, something I sometimes do when half asleep. But then the shadow spoke. It was my neighbor. She was holding something in her hand. "You should lock your doors at night," she said calmly, then walked out. The next morning, I heard strange noises beneath my window. She was outside, speaking in tongues, clutching a plastic bag. Inside it was the rotting corpse of a dog. It was sweltering outside. The smell was unbearable. I was terrified. I went to a neighbor's apartment in it and asked what was going on. He was just as scared. He told me she'd broken into his place while he was watching TV with his kids. When he got up for a snack, he found her behind the couch, holding a power drill. Suddenly, I understood what she'd been holding in my room. I called the police. They arrived quickly and confirmed she was a known schizophrenic with a history of violence. She hadn't taken her medication in months, but because she owned her unit, they couldn't enter without her consent. Their only option was to wait. I stayed awake for 2 days, waiting for her to leave. At 2 a.m., I heard her door open. She was going to the 7-Eleven across the street. I called 911. 3 police cars and a mental health transport van arrived in under 2 minutes. They restrained her and took her away. Within minutes, it was as if she'd never existed. I never saw her again, but I still dream of her, standing over my bed. I was about 15 minutes from finishing my night shift when a loud crash echoed through the office. I got up to investigate him and found a sizable rock embedded in the front window. It was strange. I worked in an industrial district. It was 11:30 p.m. Every other business was closed. No one around. I called security, then decided to leave early. As I walked to my car, my imagination ran wild. I broke into a sprint, jumped in, and drove off. Halfway home, I calmed down until I realized I hadn't unlocked the car. It had been unlocked the entire time. I reached back, checking the back seat for anyone hiding. I called a friend who said he was out drinking. I decided to meet him. I grabbed to my car and started riding. It was a beautiful moonlight, quiet streets. Then their bike behind me. I moved to the side of the road. The rider passed slowly. As he drew even with me, he turned and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was empty, twisted, insane. I flinched. He kept going. Then I noticed he was riding my mom's bike. I pedaled home as fast as I could. When I arrived, her bike was gone, and one of my car doors, the back left, was open. I'd been driving. I had no reason to open that door. I once worked the night shift at a remote campground, midnight to 8 a.m. Wasn't bad. I brought my PS2 and spent most nights gaming. The only company I had was darkness and the occasional camper. I worked alone in a small 8x8-foot shack surrounded by woods. During my first week, the outgoing night attendant told me about a payphone mounted a few feet from the shack. "It rings every night at 4:17 a.m., he said. "Just once. Probably an automated test." He'd never answered it. For months, I didn't hear it. My windows were closed. But in mid-August, I started leaving them open. Sure enough, at 4:17 a.m., the phone rang. Once, the ring sounded wrong, distant, as if the phone were underwater. One night, I set an alarm for 4:15. I waited by the phone. When it rang, I answered. Silence. "Hello?" I said. Nothing. I tried again for a week. Same result. Dead air. I stopped answering. Then, in early October, I decided to try again. At 4:17, I picked up. Hello? Silence. Then a sound, like someone inhaling through clenched teeth. A voice, rough and gravelly, like it had been shredded, said my full name. First, middle, and last. A name I'd never spoken to anyone at work. A voice I'd never heard before. My breath caught. I hung up. I dropped coins into the slot and pressed *69. The call had come from California. I lived in Indiana.